A start. So welcome everybody. Great to see you all on the call and see your faces and your names. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're all on traditional lands throughout the country. We're on Gadigal land tonight. We'd like to recognise the Indigenous people and their ongoing connections to lands, waters and culture, and also to pay our respects to elders past and present. Tonight's topic is all about the upcoming federal election behind the scenes. And with the next federal election looking like it'll be in May, there's a strong chance that there may be a minority government with the independents holding the balance of power. Tonight will be a fantastic opportunity to hear from one sitting independent MP and also from two others who are giving it a red hot go in terms of running and hoping to be elected. Our speakers, how we're going to run the evening is, first of all, we're going to hear from Dr. Sophie Scamps, who's an MP, independent member for Mackellar in the northern part of Sydney, and she's in the House of Representatives. We'll then have some Q&A from the group. And after that, we're going to hear from Kaz Heiss, who's the independent candidate for Cowper in the north of New South Wales. And then from Nicolette Boulay, who's the independent candidate for Bradfield, also in Sydney. So to start with, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Sophie. Thank you, Dr. Sophie Scamps MP, for joining us. Sophie was elected as the member for Mackellar as an independent candidate in the 2022 federal election. She was elected with 52.5% of the after preferences vote, with a campaign that focused on climate change, integrity, and respect for women. Prior to this, she served the community as a doctor in the emergency department of Mona Vale Hospital and also practiced as a GP in Narrabeen. And she's also, in previous years, competed internationally as a sprinter and a middle distance runner. So, Sophie, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
And we thought we'd start by asking you about what have been some of the highlights and lowlights of your term since you were elected into Parliament in 2021.
Thanks, Carolyn and Stephen, and hi to everyone. Thanks for joining. Love your commitment to the environment. Highlights. Look, very simply, one of the highlights has been working with the other crossbenchers. They're a fabulous group, really amazing, and it's such an honour and a privilege, and and fun to work with them. And it's just been an enormous privilege to represent the electorate. And I always love getting out into the community and meeting people. You see and hear so much more of what's going on in your community in this role, and it does seem like an amazing privilege. In terms of highlights inside Parliament, there's a couple at least. One of them was getting through a really important amendment on ending jobs for mates. So when the new Administrative Review Tribunal was being re-established, because it had been stacked heavily with cronies and had to be abolished, when it was being re-established, there wasn't going to be any change to the way that appointments were made to the body. And I was able to work with the Attorney General, basically because it didn't get through the Senate. I put in an amendment saying there needed to be independent selection panels. It didn't get through the Senate, and then the Attorney General came back and basically, chatted to me, negotiated with me about what they needed. And so we've set a precedent, and it's quite amazing in that we now have independent selection panels mandated and legislated for when appointments are being made to this really important democratic institution, and it really does set a precedent. And, when we hear what's happened up in the Northern Territory with the police commissioner, we know we need to keep going further with that type of work. And it's really important, that integrity work, because we don't get good decisions unless we have a democracy that we can trust and that is strong. So it's really important, as we know, to keep going with all that type of work as well. And then the other highlight for me was there's only been one way that our environment laws have been strengthened, and that was with the expansion of the water trigger to protect all our waterways, water resources, aquifers, rivers from all types of gas fracking. So that was a huge win. And that was an amendment I put in the House, and I know that some of the crossbench were working on it in the Senate too. But it was really good. We put a lot of time went in, talking to Tanya Plibersek on that and trying to get that across the line. So that was really good. You might ask me next what my major disappointment was, and of course it was not getting the EPA and the EIA through. They were major disappointments. We've been working so hard on all that work, so it's an enormous piece of work that needs to happen. Next time around, and particularly, that ending native forest logging have been, and we'll keep working on that. And I know Kaz is working on it hard too. So it's awesome. You come at it from multiple angles in multiple different ways.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. That's really good. Sorry, you're going to go.
I was just going to ask, like, how will you actually, assuming, lots of assumptions, and I'm probably jumping ahead a bit, but assuming, we have the outcome we want and you're both elected and there's a strong crossbench and maybe even a minority, let's just say for argument's sake, a minority Labor government, how do you actually get stronger? It's been so frustrating, that EPA and the reforms to EPBC Act. How do you act? What can you actually do behind the scenes to really move it a bit quicker?
Well, I think there's look, it'll be extraordinary. I really, really hope, can't take anything for granted. I really hope I'm back in there. I really hope Kaz and Nicoletta in there too. Would be awesome to have you guys in there. Look, there's so much we can do. There's a lot that goes on that you would, never be aware of on just making different bits of legislation better. But I mean, particularly if there's a balance of power. I mean, I think a lot of us are thinking that, we probably won't, or I won't. I would prefer not to have an agreement and just vote on every single piece of legislation as it stands. And there's going to be negotiations all the way along. And I think Zoe Daniels said it when she gave her press club speech, and she said, we're the spine of the government. We keep pushing for more on gambling, on junk food, on environment, on climate, all these different things. We're really pushing and clearing the way because we are just responding to what our community wants. And so that really gives that legitimacy to what we're saying. And it gives it that power as well. I'm not really, when it came to something like gambling or ending native forest logging, I wasn't, you can be pretty clear about what your ask is, and that lobbying doesn't have the same power on you. So you really are clearing the way, I think, for stronger action on a number of different things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sophie.
I'll say one more thing. I will just say one more thing as well. It's as much as what we do inside Parliament as what we do outside Parliament. So all those conversations, all those, we have the journalists are really interested in what we have to say, pushing different agendas in the media, and sort of, in many ways, driving a national conversation on particular issues is really, really important. And we saw how important that was with Zali Steggall on getting action on climate change. And also Helen Haines and others on the National Anti-Corruption Commission. We know how powerful that is, just that helping drive the national conversation and having other voices in those conversations and holding both the major parties to account at the same time.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Yeah, that's a good point. Just going into some of, I suppose, your particular areas of interest. I mean, you've touched there on forests, but it'd be good, we're obviously an environment group, just to get your sort of thoughts around, and your, what your involvement is around biodiversity, nature, climate as a whole.
Yes, so we obviously need to do a whole lot more. We need to strengthen our environment laws, number one. We know that they're broken. That was a real, I think, disappointment for many in the environment movement, that this term we actually didn't see much change in those environment laws at all. We do obviously need an EPA, but we need to strengthen our environment laws. And it would be, I mean, I really want to see an end to native forest logging. I just think it's a mindless activity that makes no sense whatsoever. I would love to see it just ended for the sake of ending it, because it doesn't make sense. But then there's going to be a big debate, I think, around how we do rebuild our biodiversity. Apparently it's going to cost, X billion dollars a year for the next 20 years. So that's going to be a lot of money. So having those discussions about how we do actually get there, that we are improving our environment, improving nature, is going to be an important discussion as well.
Yeah. And do you think when you're out and about in your electorate, is climate still as important to the electorate as it was back in 2022?
People aren't talking about it nearly as much. I think there is a kind of not explicitly spoken about nearly as much because people are doing it particularly hard. So I know a couple of my volunteers who are very, very strong on the environment, would like me to be doing more on climate and environment, and I'm not doing less. Like I'm still as strong as ever on those things, but the issue is I came in as a community independent, saying I would listen to my community. You can't then just shut off and not listen to them when they say they're struggling. So they're struggling on cost of living big time. And we've been door knocking businesses as well, and they are really struggling. And, we can all walk and chew gum at the same time. So I think a lot of people, it is front of mind, housing and cost of living, but action on the climate and environment in this electorate is very strong. It hasn't gone away. And people were just over the moon when we managed to hopefully end PEP 11 once and for all. That drilling for oil and gas off our coastline was a massive thing. And I think the other thing is, I think there was a sense that maybe Labor had done quite a bit of work on climate, or I think an environment. I think we all know that that's not the case, and we need to do a whole lot more. But I think just that sense of desperate urgency is not the same as it was last time. But that doesn't mean people aren't as caring about their environment as ever.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And we wondered, just on I suppose, a little bit of a more personal note, looks like it's a pretty full-on job. How do you juggle and I know you've got a family, how do you juggle life, political life and home life?
Don't take any tips from me, Kaz. No, I really hope that if I really am hoping I get elected again, because I hope to juggle it a bit better this time, because I think I've been campaigning for like nearly over 3 years now. It feels like that. But and as you said, I was an 800-meter runner, 400 and 800-meter runner. Everyone says it's a marathon, not a sprint, but I think I was middle distance. So I went out hard and kept going hard. But you do have to pace yourself. It is exhausting. There's multiple roles. There's the work in Canberra, and it's not just legislation that goes on in Canberra as well. There's always media that might be crack of dawn. There's press conferences and meetings coming up, loads of meetings, trying to write speeches at the drop of a hat. It's pretty full on. And I always say I feel really lucky that I had the experience of being a junior doctor, because it's quite, and you'll be good too, Kaz, because it's not dissimilar to that. It's that kind of buzzers going off, 3 things at once, and it doesn't stop. It just never stops. But it's great fun. It's really incredibly stimulating. It's incredibly empowering. And, I wouldn't change it for the world, and feel incredibly privileged to be there. And, we're working in a great bunch of people, and I think really do genuinely feel like we're making a difference in that parliament. And for Australia, and I think when we see what's happening in the US, I think, we are actually, a lot of people say it, like the UK is looking to what happened here with the community independent movement, as do the US a little bit, wistfully. But it is very, very busy. I think I was saying there's kind of 3 jobs in one. You've got your legislation, you've got developing your own private members' bills and the issues that your community wants you to push on with. You've got you need to respond to what the government's doing to make sure that that's going through as you would hope, and you don't want to, whether you do or don't want amendments, and trying to always hear from the community and experts at the same time. Then you've got the work that your office needs to do in looking after the community on individual issues, constituent issues, and then it's just being out in the community, trying to listen and be part of the community. So you never stop, quite frankly, but there are lots of good things. I love it. Lots of amazing things that you do along the way. So it's I think that it's the type of role that I won't get to do forever, so I enjoy it while I can.
Yeah, what a great way to look at it. And when the Parliament's sitting and you're in Canberra, do you share accommodation with other Teals, or how do you have your own place, or how do you manage all that?
I did have my own apartment, which I was sharing just with my own team for a while, but it got a bit expensive. So we all just sort of bunk in around the place. We usually have Airbnbs or just I'm now just, I usually stay at the one hotel actually, but it's just easy. You basically get home, go to, desperately tired and go to bed.
Yeah.
But they are like, it's nice. There's a lot of camaraderie there as well. And we do all have dinner together when we can. It's not always easy to find a time, but we do try and have dinner together. Particularly, there's always things to chat about, catch up on, or just sort of debrief on.
Yeah, fantastic. And just bring it back to your current campaign and, the next few months. I mean, how do you feel your campaign is going, and looking at our group, there'll be quite a few members of our group that are in your electorate. Is there other particular things that we can do to support yourself?
It's like last time, you have a gut feel, you have a feel. My sense is it's going really well. When I sort of walking around or in the electorate, or people say, go, love what you're doing, I support you, or we're door knocking a lot, love what you're doing. Yeah, of course I know who you are, I'm voting for you. Or if they've got an issue, you can stop and chat, and you can see people who might be concerned about an issue. They really appreciate even just being listened to. It's incredible how powerful it is. So I have a good sense, sort of that on the ground sense. And I had that last time. I had people, I worry, of course, then your mind starts ticking in going, right, I need to be doing this. I need to be doing this. And I had the same last time, but I kept feeling it was good. And people say, oh, you need to get in the national media more. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I said, I know, yeah, I could, but you should just see what's happening on the ground in Mackellar when you speak to people. And that's what really counts, I think. And the other thing is, my office has been extraordinary. When I said we have that role of looking after our constituents, I've had this team of people, some volunteers who've looked after the constituents, and they've just done a beautiful job. So when people ring up, people don't ring their federal MP lightly. They're usually in some level of distress, and they get a lovely person that actually wholeheartedly is trying to help them on the end of the line. And I think that's made a huge difference as well. And we're trying to cover off all aspects, communicate in so many different ways, and really hear from people as well. So we're all still working as hard as we possibly can, and it does feel good. But we won't know till election day. So what can people do is, we can't take it for granted that I'll get elected. It is quite a conservative seat. It is a different context from last time. Because climate, environment and integrity are not as I said, they're not front of mind. Really, cost of living and housing are the major things that people talk about, and health. So luckily, I've been strong on those things as well. And I think I have a good story to tell, but we keep saying we can't take it for granted. It's the most critical election we have possibly ever. We can't go backwards when it comes to the gains that we have on reducing carbon emissions and the move towards renewables. It's really, really important that we don't have a 20-year hiatus on all those things, and that we sustain the direction that we're going in and improve it as well, and keep pushing in that direction. And I will be announcing, it's not going to be a huge announcement, but I'll be announcing sort of further policies on renewables and batteries support for that type of thing as well. And also tying it in with the whole cost of living thing, because that really resonates with people at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just going to ask anyone on the call, if you've got questions for Sophie, if you could pop them in the chat in the next couple of minutes, that would be amazing. And Sophie, I also wanted to just say before I ask, we've got one more question for you. There's people who live in your electorate on the call, but there's also other people more widely, and people have got all sorts of different skills on this call. So I'm going to guess that if someone can volunteer, they'd be welcome, and they probably head to your website. If someone wants to donate to your campaign, I presume there's a link that maybe we can circulate later. And there would be amazing skills across the board in our group as well. So if you're comfortable, I might suggest to people, if they did want to volunteer, either handing out you know, doing the most important on the ground work, or even sort of more professionally, that it might be, you know, that it would be potentially welcome if they reached out?
Yeah. Oh, that would be absolutely incredible. I mean, any of help and support we can get is always very, very welcome. We love it, and just having that show of support, the community being involved. This is a community independent movement, and last time I was sort of telling this story the other day at an event I was at. I was down at Bilgola Beach, and they had a one of those long ocean swims. And as it came to the finish, the very last bit, you had 4 young men, stroke for stroke, neck for neck. And one of them caught a wave and just sort of blasted ahead and came out miles ahead of the others. And that's what I said. It was like being a community independent, I can work as hard as I possibly can. My team can work incredibly hard, but unless we have that wave of support underneath us, it's going to be really hard. So we welcome everyone getting involved in any way they possibly can. And I used to feel very shy, just so uncomfortable asking for donations, but but now I know how helpful they are and what it means. And there is an attack campaign. They see us coming this time. They want their seats back. There's been a nasty campaign, and we need to just combat that, in a really positive way. And, it all takes time, effort, and money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No worries. We've got 2 questions in the chat. I'll just quickly ask you the last one from us, which I think you've almost alluded to already, but, if it is a minority government, whether it's Labor or Liberal, how would you see that working from your point of view?
I mean, I personally, in this community independent movement, people really respond to the fact that you are free to vote in alignment with your community's values and views every single time. And I think it would be really hard to undermine that. I think that I would try and retain that power to vote on everything and negotiate everything. And we'll see what happens with the outcome. Australia really gets to decide what happens with the major parties. But the other thing I keep saying is that people keep saying, "Oh, who are you going to support?" And I said, well, it's very, very clear what my policies are. I've been very consistent, very clear. Everyone knows what they are. I'm telling everyone, as much as I possibly can. It depends what they put on the table that aligns with the views and values.
That's good.
Thanks, Sophie. So we've got 3 questions and a comment. So we'll might cap it with these, and so that we have time to go to Kaz next. But the questions are, one is from Catherine around, have you got a feel for how many independents are running federally this time versus last time? And I suppose that sort of bigger picture. Freddie's asked, how does the community independent consultative model operate in regard to highly polarized issues where community consensus is hard to achieve? And how do you then determine which way you'll vote? Thought that was a great question. And how are you managing the funding costs to your office? The funding cuts to your office by government?
We just lost Sophie.
Do we still have you, Sophie?
Sophie didn't like the questions.
Give her a minute. And great idea from Lou. Thank you. Social media is super important. Follow all the independents, like, comment, and share away. That's a great tip that we can all do. And another question, that's a great question from you, Phil, too, about how to make the connection between renewable energy benefits and cost of living pressures.
Should we jump to Kaz?
Yeah. Given Sophie's not...
Yep. We'll come back to Sophie, I think. That was really interesting, though. So now I'd love to introduce Kaz. You are there, Kaz? Yes.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, Carolyn and Stephen. So far, so good. Yeah.
So I just do a little bit of an intro. So Kaz stood at the 2022 election as the community independent for Cowper, and it was turned from a safe seat into the Nationals' most marginal seat at that election. So congratulations on that. Just a bit about Cowper. So Cowper is an interesting area. It covers an area from Port Macquarie in the south to Coffs Harbour in the north. And just a little bit about Kaz. So Kaz very much grew up around that area. She started in nursing and then advanced to become a regional healthcare leader, overseeing nursing and midwifery, sustainable healthcare, and disaster response teams. Sophie. Okay, Kaz, just give me one moment and we'll...
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Sophie?
Sophie, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt. I was just typing.
No.
Sorry, Ken.
We'll just we'll just finish off some of those questions and then we'll jump to Kaz. Did you catch any of those questions that we mentioned or not?
No,
No?
I didn't.
Okay.
So we've got Martin's kindly answered one of them, I think, which is around the other independents that are potentially standing this time around. But we've got one from Freddie around how do you manage when there's quite a polarized views in the community? How do you sort of reach consensus in your position, and then how do you determine how you'll vote? And another couple of questions, one about how have you managed with the funding cuts, and one around what's your tip around connecting renewable energy benefits and the cost of living pressures?
Yeah, the cuts, the cut to our staff was, I think maybe, so the very first thing that the Labor government did was cut our parliamentary staff from 4 to 1. And then the very last thing they did was make it far harder for independents to get in, not this time around, but next time around. So those two things make it very difficult. I was particularly disappointed with the donation law changes, because it just undermines our democracy, cuts out competition, that type of thing. I think it's really bad for our democracy. So there's that, but it did make it incredibly hard. I have one advisor, and we have to cover off everything. So you do need to stay focused on what's important to your electorate. And I think that also helped having a larger crossbench. So when it came to something, say, integrity, we all sort of just naturally picked off an issue. I did jobs for mates. It all just sort of fell out naturally in many ways. And Helen Haynes is doing pork barrelling. Zali does truth and political advertising. Kate was doing donation and electoral reform. So all those types of things. What else? So that's around the funding. How will renewables and cost of living go together? So what I'm thinking about is a battery policy. A lot of people, we have 4 million homes with solar. But it's not fully utilized, obviously, because only a couple of 100,000 have a battery, and we have incredibly, very high energy prices, electricity prices at the moment. So having expanding the small scale renewable energy scheme to include batteries to a certain degree will help not only in the storage capacity locally, but also will reduce prices for everyone, not just the people who have the batteries, and improve storage. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about for the batteries and renewables. And it's really, until bidirectional charging comes in, which isn't ready just yet, obviously, and might take a little bit longer to get in here, but it's just in the meantime, let's get going on more storage. What was the other question?
The other one was when there's a highly polarized issue in the community, how do you get to consensus?
Yeah.
On a view that
Yeah.
you take?
So I guess something like, actually in this electorate, nuclear is quite popular. But you just need to take time. I mean, you can understand why nuclear's some people like the idea of it, because if you want to solve climate change, it seems like an easy fix on the surface of things. But when you take the time to have a conversation about what actually, what it would mean and the delay and all of that, people do understand. And again, it's as much talking to our community, but also listening to experts and the evidence on things as well. That's also very, very important with how you make decisions. So I think I saw in there before I got cut off, something about social media.
Yeah.
And the social media ban. A whole lot needs to be done on social media. There was a vote on banning social media for under 16-year-olds. I ended up abstaining from. That's one that I abstained from because it came in really late in the piece. There wasn't time. It was really contentious which way we should go. Obviously, there needs to be something done to make those online spaces much, much safer. But was it actually going to work, or was it going to be harmful? We had experts telling us one thing and experts telling us the other thing, and I hadn't had time to go out to the community. And so in the end, it was just very last minute. We sort of were hearing about it the night before. So that was a difficult one. And I think we'll need to keep going on looking at what we do to make social media much safer but it was a difficult one because I just didn't have the time. Sometimes you don't have a huge amount of time, but you're trying to hear from groups like, Nature Conservation Council. If it's something to do with the environment, you really do rely on people with the deep knowledge in the areas, because it's very hard to get deeply across things, obviously, sometimes in a matter of days or hours even.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sophie.
Yeah, fantastic, Sophie. Thanks so much for joining us and for staying for so long, and good luck with everything.
Oh,
you're doing.
no, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. I'll say good night because I've had a few late nights, but all the best.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you,
Good luck,
Sophie.
Kaz.
Bye.
Yeah.
Go Kaz.
Go Kaz, yeah. Kaz, take two. I think I've done the full intro there, so I won't sort of go through that again, but just to say that you're standing as the independent candidate for Cowper.
Yes.
And I thought we'd made, I know Cowper and your area has been hit by this week's cyclonic weather, so maybe I thought we might start with just a bit of an update on how that's going in your community.
Yes, of course. Can you hear and see me okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me tonight. So I am tonight in Port Macquarie, which is Biripi land. There's 3 nations in Cowper: Biripi, Dunghutti and Gumbaynggirr. So the whole region has been hit mostly with the rain, some of the wind events, nothing like Queensland or the northern rivers around Lismore and those areas. But certainly we've got flooding. My daughter's in Bellingen, the other side of the river, and still flooded with lots of other people. And, obviously we've had one tragedy with someone driving their car across a bridge that gave way, and unfortunately they couldn't be saved in the floodwaters. So it's always a scary time. It does bring back a little bit of PTSD for me. In 2009, when I was managing Bellingen Hospital, actually, I lost my own house to a flood that we had at that time. And I had to spend 4 days sleeping at the hospital because we were isolated. And we were a very tired bunch of staff by the end of that. But, just that the real impact of climate, and people saying, oh, that was a 1 in 100 year event. Well, it wasn't. And we've had more since then. And, we've seen what's happened in Lismore since then, and now with the cyclone this time. So it's very real in people's minds, the notion of climate change and the impact that it's having. And we're literally seeing climate refugees in this region. So we've seen people in Lismore homeless now since the last event, and it must be really taxing on people's mental well-being as well, and also the future of the community. So it is a really difficult time. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kaz. And just looking at some of your particular areas of focus, would you like to just tell us a little bit about some of your areas of interest, again, particularly around the environment and climate in particular?
Yeah, so I actually started my, I suppose, political career as an environmental activist. And I was one of the early activists in the days of Wild Cattle Creek and those kind of blockades that we had back in the late 80s and early 90s, Chalundi and those types of ones. And I thought, no, I've got to keep going with my career, and maybe I can change the system from within the system, because we don't seem to be getting too far blockading. And now I'm sick of being a bureaucrat, and I think I have to help change legislation. So I've always had a lifelong commitment to the environment. And in this region, it's very starkly obvious that we're in trouble. I mean, we live in a biodiversity hotspot in Cowper. We have the footprint of the Great Koala National Park firmly in this seat. We've also got marine parks, World Heritage areas, existing World Heritage areas, and Gondwana rainforest. It's pretty spectacular. And I'm sure if any of you are bushwalkers or mountain bikers, I'm sure you've probably visited this region at some stage. But, talking about biodiversity before, we've got 50 threatened species at the moment, one of those being the koala. And many other greater gliders and many other beautiful species. And, we're still hearing from forestry that they're doing selective logging, and it's going to regenerate forests, and yet you go to where the logging has been happening and you see clear-felled forests and foresters saying, oh, sorry about that, we'll pay the fine. So since the announcement of the Great Koala National Park, and I know this is a state, not a federal issue, but I certainly will be standing alongside the community and saying it needs to be hastened. Since the announcement, we've seen an increase in logging in this region by over 200%. So, yes, so for us here, climate is, and even environmental issues are still in people's minds. As Sophie said, it's still very much a platform that I stand on as well. We need to be looking towards a renewables future. And I'm also interested in the battery projects, not only for affordability, and that's the way we have to go into the future, but also even for energy security, because right now in this region, there are still lots of people without power as a result of the storm. So we need to be looking at events and how do we also safeguard against those for people. So it's forefront of mind for me, but it's the same for our community. Cowper is not a rich community. In fact, there are 3 places within Cowper, Kempsey, Nambucca Heads and Maxville, that were just designated to be 3 of the most socioeconomically disadvantaged communities in New South Wales. And so we do have a very poor electorate as opposed to many others. And so people are really concerned about literally paying the rent in a lot of cases, mortgages, feeding their families. In fact, I was at the Kempsey neighbourhood centre the other day, and there's people lined up, with shopping trolleys and families, and they had $18,000 in food relief for their program for the year, and yet every day they've got homeless, hungry families to feed. And so people are really feeling it. And I think the message that's resonating here is it has been a National Party seat since Federation. At one stage, some of you might say, but what about Rob Oakeshott? The boundaries have changed in Cowper. When Rob Oakeshott was an independent here because he left the National Party, that was in the seat of Lion, and the boundaries have changed. So in Cowper itself, it's always been a National Party seat. And, basically people are saying, well, why is life getting harder, not easier? Why am I paying more tax? Why is there more tax on everything else? Why can't my kids get ahead? Even if I was lucky enough to get ahead, why can't my kids? And I'm a great example of that. I'm a nurse, and I bought a house in Bellingen when I started my career many, many years ago. My daughter's a school teacher there now, and there's absolutely no way that's on her radar, because what was once 3 times an annual income is now 10 or 11 times an annual income. So things are getting out of reach of people that are working really hard, that are qualified. It's not just people that are homeless. So I think in this region, that sick of party politics as usual, the system's broken. We're really facing risk of democracy, risk of losing democracy, particularly when we look geopolitically at what's happening. And I think it's really starting to resonate with people because they're seeing it in their own lives.
So when you might feel like you've answered this, but you've talked a little bit about what you see and what you're committed to in terms of climate and the environment, and then obviously the pressures that many of your community are feeling, particularly economically and I suppose risk to democracy, and also I suppose a fairness kind of angle. But is there, you might feel like you've answered this, but is there anything else that you're particularly passionate about that you're really hoping to, if you are fortunate and you're elected, that you'd really like to sort of take?
Absolutely. Yes, so as you said, it's not my first run. So given it's my second run, we've had time to kind of build the plane this time. Last time we were, building it as we were flying it. And so if anyone has the time to go to my website, you'll see that we do have 20 really good policies formulated that we've done in collaboration with peak bodies and also with the community. So there are 20 clear issues, but they're all kind of segueing into each other. So things like childcare, things that are kind of all part of that kind of housing, cost of living crisis. There's a lot of stuff wrapped up in that. And then there's health and education, other key platforms where people feel the fabric of society, the things that used to be strong, are weakening, particularly in this region. So we're having trouble with skill shortages and all of those things. So we do have a good suite of policies, but certainly climate integrity, equity, and by equity, I don't just mean for women in Parliament, but I also mean, that kind of social justice piece for communities in this region particularly, but across Australia. I think the Great Divide is getting wider, and I think it's very important that we go to the cornerstones of that: health, education, and chop wood, carry water is really kind of where this election is at, I think. But as Sophie said, very critical election. And it's really important. So part of what we're trying to do is also to kind of educate the region as we're campaigning about just the importance of their vote, because a lot of people have lost hope.
Yeah.
Mm.
And how's it all going? Tell us a bit, when you're out and about in the community,
Yeah.
what sort of response are you getting, and how are you feeling about it all?
It's as you said, we went close last time. We're now the most we're the closest possible National Party seat that could win, which would be an amazing win if we can get rid of one of the National Party seats. And so we only had, I think it's 2,600 primary votes I need to peel off them to win this time. So it's very close. We've got 133,000 voters. So this time, last time we had about 1,000 people on our kind of volunteer mailing list. This time we've got 3,500. We've already knocking, up until the cyclone event, we were knocking 1,000 doors a week. So we've already knocked over 6,500 doors, and I go out on a lot of those door knocks myself. But we're just having those one-on-one markets in town where we're really got hundreds of volunteers activated and out there kind of talking to people and really trying to understand how we can represent their voice in a different way of doing democracy in this region, and kind of activate that sense of hope in the community. So the sense is quite good, and I can probably share with this group. I won't share the details, but the polling currently is also very good, and we're still the underdog, but only just. And it's a very, very winnable seat. So provided we keep the momentum, I'm a bit disappointed that it's kind of stretched out a bit longer now. We kind of had everything budgeted and focused on it being an April election, but that's okay. We keep going. It gives us more time to really finesse what we're working on and work very closely with the community. So yes, it's a very interesting time, and I do think it's a very winnable seat. Certainly Anthony Green does too. We had Four Corners up here the other day, and we had Casey Briggs come up and interview us, take some snippets for the election night so that they can cross to Cowper on election night and track how we're travelling. So it's going to be a very close race.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Very good. And the same sort of question that we asked to Sophie, I suppose, is there anything particularly that, members of our group and the wider group that we've got lots of others that aren't on this call as well that can do to support you in what you're doing, that you particularly need?
No, I think like the same thing that Sophie said, really, and I still do find it hard to ask for donations. We have had very generous donors this time, and many people in our community giving what they can. But as I've said, we're now affected by the current storm event, and we've got to try and budget for a few more weeks that we didn't think we did. So we are struggling. So if any of you are already part of Climate 200, thank you very much. We have had some donations from there, and also the Community Independence Network as well. But yes, for us, I think we've got a great campaign team. We've got the bones of everything going right. We've just got to keep it in motion to the end.
Fantastic.
Yes, yes. But I did have a little poem I was hoping I might share.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Definitely.
Is that okay?
Yes.
I wanted to
Love
talk
it.
to you because, we can get lost in we can get kind of lost in it all of talking the detail, but I wanted to bring it back to my why. And this is a poem that I kind of go back to regularly. It's only one stanza out of a poem, not that I wrote. A poet called Drew Dellinger wrote this, and it's called The Hieroglyphic Stairway. But the stanza that I want to read you is my why, and it should be all of our whys. And however you can help, this is the reason I think we're all here. So I shall read it. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, and birds were all dying? Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think if it's all right, big clap for that.
that's,
And if it's all right, we might circulate that with the notes
Of
for
course.
today's session, because that's
fantastic.
I've got a little tingle on my
So
spine.
that's why I've quit my job.
Yeah,
I
well,
literally quit my job. I had a great job. I was the executive director of nursing and midwifery for this region and also the disaster coordinator for health for this region. So I've had to sit on my hands the last week and watch as my colleagues have all managed the disaster instead of me for health. But this is the why, and it's more important than anything.
mm,
Yeah.
Thanks.
So thank you for having me tonight.
Thanks, Kaz. Kaz,
Yeah.
are you able to stay on the call?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Great. So, because what we thought, Nicolette's on, and we'll introduce you in just a sec, Nicolette. But what we thought was we might go to Nicolette now and then ask the questions of you both. Do a short Q&A at the end with both of you.
Of course. Yes.
So, it's my pleasure now. So, thank you very much, Kaz. That was great to hear about what's going on in Kaupo, and we all really, I know I speak for everyone in saying that we all really wish you the very best and keep going. We're really excited about what might happen in your area.
definitely.
So Nicolette Boulay, thank you very much for joining us. Nicolette is standing in the seat of Bradfield, which is currently Paul Fletcher's seat in the north of Sydney, and he's retired or retiring. Nicolette stood in the 2022 election and had a swing to her of 20.9%. This once very safe Liberal seat is now very marginal at this election. So Nicolette, I know you've already been at a meeting this evening, and you're probably, I presume, working 24/7. So thank you for joining us. But tell us a little bit about what you're hearing on the ground in Bradfield, and perhaps how does that differ from what you've heard in previous campaigns?
Well, just for people, hello, there's some familiar faces. Oh, that's interesting. Don't know what happened there. Can you still hear me?
We can
We
hear
can
you.
hear you. We just are seeing a very unusual screen.
Interesting. Let me turn that off, turn it back on again.
That's it.
There we go.
There we go.
Interesting. Yeah, so for people that don't know Bradfield, it's this time round because the seat of North Sydney was abolished by the Electoral Commission and a redistribution at the end of last year. So part of North Sydney now makes up a bigger Bradfield that's moved south. So the top of Bradfield in Sydney is Wahroonga, just south of Hornsby, and it comes all the way down the train line through to Gordon and Chatswood and to St Leonard's. And across to the east, on the bottom of it is Northbridge, and up on the east through back up to St Ives and North Turramurra. And if you're in the west, you probably want to be called out as well, like West Pymble and West Lindfield and Roseville and places like that. So it's the kind of place that you move to raise your kids, because it's a smashing array of public and independent private schools. It's got beautiful, really lovely suburbs that are well serviced for public transport. Don't often have to raise your kids and drive them places. They can stagger home after, going to live music in the city, or else they recreate. And it's surrounded by national parks, which is a really, really beautiful thing until you live under the impact of climate change. I don't want to get competitive with people like Kaz, not even close. But we do have climate impacts in our electorate, such as 40% uptick in the price of insurance premiums for homes that abut the national park in places like North Turramurra. So it's an equal most formally educated seat in Australia, alongside Goldstein, where Zoe Daniel, the independent, has that seat in Victoria. It has over 60 aged care facilities. So a lot of people come to live on the North Shore, raise their kids, and just don't leave. They stay and retire. It's a lovely place. What that means, though, is with the cost of living crisis and a housing crisis, for the first time ever, we're seeing an increasing number of younger people staying at home, and people moving back home with their boomer parents because they haven't been able to afford the mortgage payments, or they need help with childcare. So grandparents are doing, a few days a week on childcare, and probably also, if they've got older grandkids, paying HECS debts as well if they can. So quite literally, the concept of a granny flat has come alive in our area. Grannies are now living in the granny flats and moved out of their houses to make way for their adult families coming home. Now, I know that sounds like a real first world problem. Based on everything else, it is, but to be clear, it's, no postcode is immune to things like poverty, like domestic violence, and homelessness and insecure housing. And I think I've got 2 kids, 20 and 23, and they are cute. I mean, I love them, but I also want them to be able to move out of home one day. And with their HECS debts, so many kids have just given up. They study so hard, they work hard, they're not even thinking about buying a house. They can barely think about saving up for a deposit. So I think your question, Carolyn, was how is it and what's going on up here? And what's going up on the North Shore of Sydney is pretty much what's going on across the whole of Australia, bar impacts, of course, from cyclone or ex-cyclone Alfred. It's a cost of living crisis. It's a housing crisis. And probably more than most places, coming in third in Bradfield is climate crisis. It's still up there. And people see things like power bills, insurance premiums, and even supermarket prices, in part due to major parties passing the baton each time they're elected, and they drop in, drop out, and they pass the buck, and we have those climate wars that keep going. So I think also too, possibly because we tilt older in the electorate. Once you have material wealth, you're in a much better place to probably think about future generations and care about, you have more space to care about leaving your kids and your grandkids a planet they can live on. So climate's still very much in front of mind for people up in Bradfield. And do you want to just remind me, given your background on Bradfield, what your question was?
Oh, I think that's an amazing answer already, but I suppose the other part of it was, how is that differing from when you previously campaigned?
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, it was definitely a strong anti-Morrison government sentiment at the time around women and climate, and particularly integrity. And thank goodness we've got the National Anti-Corruption Commission, thanks to basically Helen Haines and Cathy McGowan and others over consecutive terms. It's room for improvement. But this time I feel what's different is it's just people know that the cost of living, the housing and the climate crisis isn't something that's just popped up in the last few weeks, months or years. This is something that we're feeling because of the major party duopoly is just not able to make decisions for the long term, and it's not able to make decisions, our structural reform decisions that are in the best interest for future generations, or even, frankly, near-term generations. So a little bit that suggests might have to do with capture, particularly corporate capture in some instances, and others has to do with the short-term cycles and the fact that we live in a blessed democracy, but it has a double-edged sword. And that's, if you're a career politician, it's inconvenient to make tricky and hard decisions like tax, for example. Who wants to talk about tax if you're a politician? You get shot down. But as an independent, that's exactly what I want to talk about. I want to talk about a tax system that's fit for purpose for the 21st century, that sets up people to be able to move around the country when they sell their house, not be penalised by stamp duties, perhaps. I think it's crazy that we tax things like, and it's a state tax in New South Wales, but we tax good things like employing people. That makes no sense to me. And yet we have a climate crisis and we don't have a disincentive for climate and carbon pollution. To me, we need a system that really looks at our current modern challenges and sends the right signals to incentivise behaviours from business and government and individuals, and disincentivise behaviours that we don't want. So I think an independent can do that. I know a fantastically broad crossbench of fabulous people like Sophie and Kaz and others they have this ability to say no. We don't have to become ministers or the Prime Minister. We're about working hard from the centre to make progress and structural changes to the things that matter. And I think that's really exciting. It's a little scary, but all right, if we don't get it done, who's going to get it done, right? So that's and I feel that the electorate is starting to really get that. We're so lucky because, unfortunately, we have Kylie Tink in the south for North Sydney, and Zali Stegel out to the southeast, and right on the east we have in McKellar Sophie, who you heard earlier today. And across the water, of course, Allegra Spender, and before that in North Sydney we've had Ted Mack, and even people like Andrew Wilkie and others that show what's possible when you have a strong independent who can make evidence-based decisions based on expert reports, for the interests of their community and for the nation, and not the interests of small, I suppose, usual suspects, shall we say?
Fantastic.
And I think the electorate's getting it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. You've got lots of supporters in our group. One of them, David Eckstein, there is actually wearing one of your shirts.
Yeah. David, did you get yourself a larger T-shirt? Because that was I think it was a child's one you were wearing the other day.
We did resolve it, yes.
Okay.
Excellent. But yeah, it sort of segues nicely into sort of, you've been here before, you've sensed how things are going. When you look at this election, I mean, on the ground there in Bradfield, how do you feel it's going? And, in
You can never really tell, but I can say that I share Kaz's moment where an extra 5 weeks of campaigning on the emotional energy, people's generosity with their time, the financial impulse that has as well to keep the momentum it's real. Having said that, we've got, we've tipped over 1,000 volunteers, and it's almost like we no longer have to recruit. People are coming in. They see people wearing the T-shirts, signing, waving signs on the weekends and door knocking, and people want to be part of, they see themselves in the volunteers and they go, oh, actually, yeah, I play football with you, or you're part of my croquet club, or whatever it might be. I can see how I want to get involved in this too. And to be clear, it's a bit like Kaz. This has been since 1940, so 75 years. It's been a seat that's been held by 5 guys from the same party. This is really exciting that we are in a marginal seat now, and it's competition. Never seen. We knock on doors and people say, no one's ever asked me about my views. This is the first time you've got my vote just for turning up. And we're seeing the Liberal candidate in particular out in force working hard. It's great. I mean, this is how it should be. People deserve better representation than they've had from that party in our electorate over the eons. It's been safe for too long. And I'm as one of the many thousands of volunteers, 1,000, if I get too over the top, but as one of the 1,088 volunteers as of this morning, it feels like it's possible. We're not polling quite as well as Kaz, but then a poll's a poll. And our feeling is when people know that I exist, they're about 75% likely to want to put me above the incumbent party. It's about spending enough to get the brand ID up, turning up with volunteer T-shirts so that people know I exist, because people understand what the Liberal Party is, they understand what Labor, what Greens, but to get known as an independent, I'm not the only independent running here as well, to get known as an independent for what I stand for, it's really hard. Most people don't engage in politics or polling day. So yeah, I got to say, don't look at sports bets. I don't believe in gambling, but we're pretty close. And the pollsters, no pressure, say that Bradfield is a seat to watch in terms of whether the Teal experiment is, just something that was a blip that happened in 2022, or whether it's here to stay, and Bradfield's the place to watch. So, yeah, I'm feeling no hubris. I'm feeling quietly confident, but it's just every day, turn up, do our best. Hundreds and hundreds of conversations, and let's see what happens the day after the election.
Thank you. And I think thank you to you, and also to Kaz and to Sophie as well for doing that hard work. Because you're changing things no matter the outcome, just by doing what you're doing. We asked the others this, and we'd like to ask you too. Is there anything that we and our members can do to help you, or what are some of the ways? Obviously, David's volunteering, which is fantastic. So that's possibly a way. But yeah, how can people help?
A few more volunteers on here too, I noticed. There we go. Volunteering is, yes, there's all the different treasures, but the main ones this far out from the election are, yes, time and money. And so one of our biggest challenges that we have is we have almost 20% of the voting electorate, could be as much as 20%, probably about 18.5%. It's Chinese, Australian, and the diaspora, like it's a very broad range of communities. It's to get known in that community does require advertising and what have you. So that's the kinds of examples, and hiring people closer to polling day to Chinese language speakers, traditional simplified Cantonese and Mandarin, to just have those conversations, because my skills are all European languages, and I'm, ordering a cocktail or a beer. I'm not talking about politics. So that's how we're going to spend any money that you donate. And time-wise, yeah, we got door knocking, and it's fun, and we put T-shirts on and we go and sit in the bar, and people look at us and come and join us and have more conversations and learn about politics and things. And really importantly, if you can't do any of those things and you know anybody else who is in the electorate who happens to have anybody under the age of 30, do your best, send them my way. I will ply them with pizza and other bribery things and put them to great use.
Thanks. Well, I'm sure that at least the number of people on the call or watching the video afterwards will reach out. One final question, and I just ask, I know we've got one question in the chat already for Kaz, but if anybody's got other questions, we'll use the last 10 minutes or so for Q&A from the floor. Just the last question, Nicolette, though, for you is, if you're elected, how, and if it does end up being a minority government, whether that's Labor or Liberal, how do you see your sort of work if you're part of the crossbench in that situation?
I think, well, it's my whole career working in finance and clean energy and management consulting and think tanks has been all about redefining good or better. And so I see this as just a natural progression, except in politics, on bringing unlikely people to the table, and the more diverse stakeholder views, the better, frankly, with expert advice and opinions, the values from the community, and then really the North Star of all North Stars, or the South Star, I suppose, if you're here in Australia, is what's in the national interest. And that is, I think, the primary responsibility of an MP, is making decisions in the national interest. They may not always be my personal ones, they may not be the ones that the majority of people in my electorate want to do, but it's my job to bring them along if it is. And from I suppose that's from a content point of view, I'm really keen on ending the climate wars. I just think we are so uniquely positioned to be a clean energy superpower. There is no downside any longer to have the parameters in place that help business and finance do the heavy lifting on delivering the solutions. So many people have the solutions. It's just the flip-flopping on policies makes finance so expensive. It frustrates the deal flow. And I know that there's a number of you on this chat too who probably feel frustration from years of changing and chopping from policies across the parties. And it's that classic thing, and I am giving a shout out to Dave. It's the classic, there's a $20 note on the floor. Someone must, if no one's picked it up yet, it must be fake. But no, actually, things like energy efficiency, super unsexy, but so important to bringing down power bills, helping the climate. And these technologies exist. We just got to get the political will to get these things in place. So I want to see us as a clean energy superpower, exporting renewable energy into things like our critical minerals and iron ore before we export. I don't want to be a dig and ship. I want to be a dig, value add and ship economy. And we'll become energy independent. We won't have to suffer the shocks and strains of geopolitical unrest to the extent we currently do as well. That's kind of it's not the only place, finance too, but that's the one thing I want to get done for my kids and my grandkids. And I just know that long, loud and legal signals that come from government are the things that we need on energy and other climate type policies.
Thank you, Nicola. That's amazing.
Mm.
So we'll head to some of the questions now. The first one's for Kaz from Lisa from a little bit earlier. Have you seen any different behaviour by the national member since last election?
Do you know, this is a very interesting question. So we're seeing in the Liberal seats that are being challenged by independents, we're seeing all kinds of fear campaigns and dirty tactics and pork barreling and all kinds of stuff happening. So far up here, it's almost been silent. So it's been very interesting. I think there is a sense that the Liberal Party, the National Party own the seat, that I'm an annoying kind of mosquito that will go away if they swat hard enough, but they haven't really done much at all yet. There's lots of rumours and social media bullying and things starting to happen, but no, we've seen nothing new come to the region. So we've compared a couple of things. So Indi is kind of the seat that I see as most comparable to Cowper in that it's a rural and regional seat. Indi's had Helen Haines and Cathy McGowan before her as an independent in the seat. Now, in the last 6 years, we've got serious problems with mobile black spots, and we've had 6 applications go in from our federal member's office for new towers. 3 of those have been built. Helen Haines in the last 6 years has put in 48 applications and 48 towers are in, and they've almost eliminated black spots. We've looked at the difference with the funding that Helen Haines has applied for with roads, and we have a lot of road issues here, particularly post-natural disaster. And federal roads, the funding is off the charts that is received to independent seats as opposed to this one. So really there's been quite laziness, from the office. It's been just a sense of, it's always been our seat and we'll continue to have our seat. And people are seeing, I think, that laziness when you ask about the behaviour of the candidate or the member since last time. No. Resting on their laurels, I would say, is the answer. And it's quite well known that the National Party is really considered to be the voice of the fossil fuel industry in the parliament. And we know that the lobbyists, and we know that that the big fossil fuel, the big extraction industries, gambling, tobacco, they're all really, really behind the National Party. And so people also are acutely aware that they've lost touch with the bush. They're not representing the regions anymore. Otherwise, things wouldn't be as dire as they are for people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very interesting. Question here for both of you. I might go to you first, Nicolette. This is an interesting one. So obviously, we've heard then from Sophie a bit earlier about the recently pushed through legislation around political fundraising. So if you're both elected to Parliament, have you got an approach to that in terms of what you might do to change that?
Oh, this is one of those things where you don't want to play your cards before you have the chance to sit in front of one of the leaders and say, here are my hit list, if you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to push hard on this. Now, I noticed just today that there are a number of legal challenges, constitutional challenges to what's been pushed through. So it could be that this gets sorted through the courts, the judiciary, as opposed to the Parliament. But it is about putting the pressure on. It is about, taking that to a proper parliamentary committee where the issues can be heard and discussed. And it was rushed through, very last minute, with just literally 18 hours for members, I heard, to read it and consider it. So I think due process and out in the air is a great thing to start. So I suppose if I could be so colloquial to say, perhaps we pick the scab a little bit when we sit down and negotiate.
Yeah, thanks, Nicolette. Kaz, any comments on that one?
Yeah, look, I think that it was a terrible way to approach trying to get rid of independence, like spending caps that are allowing, major parties to concentrate their spending in targeted seats. The fact that they're wanting to increase public funding towards, the parties and where they can maneuver their funding around cash for access. I think the whole thing, it quacks like a duck. It is a duck. Like, the devil's in the detail of this, and the detail wasn't well thought out. It wasn't well socialised. In fact, David Pocock came to Cowper recently to do a Politics in the Pub event with me, and he said he didn't even get a chance to review the legislation before it was forced through. So Jackie Lambie said the same. I think Jackie Lambie, what did she say? She said something quite funny. I think it should be named, let's rename the legislation Pigs at the Trough. That's what she said. But you know, the thing is, it was an attempt at a stitch up. So I do hope it is actually that the courts do take it quite seriously. But you know, we definitely need to bring it back for proper debate, proper consideration. I do think it is good to level the playing field in some way, and I think that should be considered. But at the moment, that's certainly not what that was an attempt at, and it needs to be called out for what it is.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I think that's the end of the questions. So thank you both so much. It was so interesting to hear from both of you, and I think just give everybody a chance to look under the hood and also get to know two amazing independent candidates a little bit more personally. I sort of feel like I certainly feel like I've got to know you a bit better just through some of the answers and perspectives that you've shared tonight. So thank you. We do understand that it's really full on, and also that this is at night on a Monday. So really appreciate your time. Thank you both, and wishing you absolutely all the luck in the world. I think the things that you stand for are very aligned to many of people in the group in terms of really wanting to see better democracy, having higher aspirations for our country, and action on climate being absolutely central to that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to join and say thank you both very much. It's been absolutely fabulous. Yeah.
It's been an honour and a privilege. Thank you.
Certainly has. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good. So we hope you've enjoyed tonight's session. And we also wanted to let you know or to suggest that if you'd like to be involved, we'd encourage everyone to get involved in whatever way makes sense for you. Next month, on Monday, the 14th of April, we'll be having Mark Mills, who's a partner at Generation Investment Management in the UK. And GIM are a pure play sustainable investment manager. And they were established in 2004. And Mark will be talking about the investor road to net zero. So something a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. And then just also wanted to let everybody know that in Sydney, if you're in Sydney, this week is Climate Action Week in Sydney. It all kicked off this morning. I know lots of our group are involved in panels and various things, and there's over 200 events. I'll send around the link again tomorrow probably, and if you can pop along to some of those and support them. There's I was involved last year and then involved again this year, and they're getting really big numbers to their events and things. It's absolutely fantastic and lots of good topics, so encourage you to try and pop along to that as well. Great. Otherwise, great to see everyone, and we'll see you all next month. Thanks again.
Bye everyone.